Goodman, as we turn right now to the oil giant ExxonMobil. It's under criminal investigation in New York over claims it lied to the public and investors about the risks of climate change. Now Exxon is fighting back against the journalists who expose how Exxon concealed its own findings dating back to the 1970s that fossil fuels cause global warming, alter the climate, and melt the Arctic ice. Students at Columbia Journalism School collaborated with the Los Angeles Times on two of the exposés. Exxon accused the students of producing inaccurate and misleading articles. In its complaint, Exxon also referred to the, quote, numerous and productive relationships ExxonMobil has with Columbia. Exxon's donated nearly $220,000 to the school. On Tuesday, Steve Cole, the dean of the Columbia Journalism School, responded to Exxon's critique written to Columbia's president after an extensive review. Cole wrote, quote, your letter disputes the substance of the two articles in the number of respects, but consists largely of attacks on the project's journalists. I've concluded your allegations are unsupported by evidence. More than that, I've been troubled to discover you've made serious allegations of professional misconduct in your letter against members of the project, even though you or your media relations colleagues possess email records showing your allegations are false, Cole wrote. Well, our guest, Bill McKibben, co-founder of 350.org, has been following the Exxon exposés closely. In October, he was arrested after staging a one-man protest at his local Exxon station in Vermont. He held a sign reading, "This pump temporarily closed because ExxonMobil lied about climate." Bill McKibben, you're a journalist yourself. Talk about the significance of ExxonMobil writing this letter of complaint to the president of Columbia University, Lee Bollinger, who then turned the letter over to Steve Cole, also a leading journalist, who did an investigation of Columbia Journalism School students.
So Exxon is never very subtle, and this was a particularly heavy-handed instance of it. Their letter to Columbia can only be described as thuggish. It carried every kind of implication about how they would, do one thing or another to them if they didn't get satisfaction. But I think they might think twice before they do it again. The letter that came back from Steve Cole at Columbia was a 6-page masterpiece of dissection. It sort of shows what happens when real reporters go up against PR people. It was remarkable, Amy. These stories, this is just Exxon trying to kick up smoke around the edges. There's no problem with the stories. They're incredibly powerful, incredibly true, and so salient to where we sit today. If Exxon had told the truth about what it knew 25 years ago, we would not be needing to have COP21. We would have sometime around COP 3 or 4 really gotten down to work as a planet, and this problem wouldn't be solved yet, but we wouldn't have wasted 25 years in phony debate.
And we did an extensive look at this on Democracy Now! On the investigation of both Inside Climate News, the Pulitzer Prize-winning journalistic organization, and Los Angeles Times, which of course has also won many Pulitzers. But the evidence that they had top scientists, they were deeply concerned about this, doing very good work, and saw climate change is real. Absolutely. But then what happened?
Well, then they, instead of acting on their knowledge, they instead set up the architecture of denial and disinformation. There was a remarkable piece that came out, a study that came out in Nature yesterday, documenting the fact that the money from Exxon and the Koch brothers constituted the sort of epicenter of denial. This was one of these big data analyses that traced the links between thousands of different organizations and newsletters and front groups, and they traced it back to Exxon. That's why the Secretary of State yesterday, John Kerry, in a pretty rare moment in Rolling Stone, really let loose on Exxon and said that it was, if these allegations were true, it was worse than the tobacco industry and a betrayal of everything that it meant to be a responsible corporation.
And the significance of the New York State Attorney General, Eric Schneiderman, launching a criminal probe into ExxonMobil.
Well, you can be sure that Exxon's taking it seriously, because yesterday they hired one of the most expensive lawyers in the country, Theodore Wells, most recently famous for having written the Deflategate report about the New England Patriots and last year's football season. Theodore Wells from Paul Weiss Rifkin in New York is now Exxon's on retainer for Exxon to try and battle these allegations. But good luck to them, because the evidence down there in black and white is pretty stunning. Remember, at the best, no one is saying, I mean, the best that anyone's saying is that Exxon was merely morally reprehensible, not outright criminal. That's the best defense that anybody's mounted for them so far.
So we're not talking about a civil probe, we're talking about a criminal probe. This could land Exxon officials in jail?
Well, who knows? I mean, they haven't said, at the moment, they're just subpoenaing documents. We're still at the beginning stages of this. And of course, the great hope is that other attorney generals, Kamala Harris in California, for instance, will, we hope, join in at some point, and that the Department of Justice, 360,000 Americans have petitioned the Department of Justice asking them to investigate Exxon.
And on the issue of ExxonMobil writing the letter to the president of Columbia University and it mentioning the amount of money they've given to Columbia, do you see this as an attack on freedom of the press?
Oh, I mean, who knows what precisely they had in mind, but Exxon has attacked the freedom of thought of an entire planet for 25 years. They knew the truth and they hid it. They told people things that they knew not to be true. There's no more devastating attack on the freedom of thought than that.